Hi, I'm Katie Maddox, career coach here at Morehead State University, and today I'm going to be talking about resumes and cover letters and how they can help you succeed after graduation. While many of the examples I'm going to be talking about today are geared toward nursing students, the information and the tips included in this presentation can be used by anyone regardless of what your major is. So the first thing to keep in mind when writing your resume is to know your audience and to figure out what employers want. So one thing I want you to keep in mind is when you go to apply for a job, especially if it's a more technical based job, such as nursing or engineering or computer design. Most everyone applying for that job is going to have the same or very similar degrees that they've earned. They're going to have a lot of the same, educational experience. And so what's going to help you stand out from the crowd when it comes to your resume is going above and beyond just those technical skills, just that education that you have, but those what we call transferable skills or those people skills. And so study has shown that the top 8 transferable skills that employers are often looking for and those that they hire are shown here on your screen. But critical thinking is typically always ranked number 1 or 1 or 2. Leadership, communication, both oral and written, your professionalism, your work ethic, your teamwork, your ability to manage your career and to set goals for yourself, your ability to use technology and to adapt with changes in technology, as well as your global fluency and your ability to interact with others. These are all the skills that you should try to incorporate and include in your resume in addition to those technical skills and the skills that you learn through your education to help your resume stand out from the others who might be applying for the same job and have the same educational background as you do. So when it comes to your resume, it's essentially your personal marketing brochure. So think of it as you're trying to sell yourself to a potential employer. So what are you wanting to sell to them? Well, you want to entice them to give you a call for an interview. You want to give them enough information in your resume that they're intrigued and they want to know more. They want to be able to sit down and chat with you. Your resume should be able to show that you can make an immediate and valuable contribution. Of course, pretty much in every job, there's going to be some training and a learning curve involved, but they want to know that you're going to get to work. And even as you're learning, you're going to be a valuable asset to their company. Make sure you only include information that's relevant to the position you're applying for. Maybe while you're in college, you work at a bakery and you can bake some really awesome cookies, but 5 years down the road, when you're applying for a job at a hospital, maybe you don't need to include that work experience on your resume anymore because in those 5 years, you have more and better information and better experience. And so you want to focus and give more time and detail into those rather than the job you had when you were in college. And then try to focus on where you're going with your career. Let your resume sort of be a guide and show them, your ambition and your goals. Let them see sort of what your drive is. So make sure to include all of that in your resume to try to sell yourself to an employer. So how long do you think an employer is going to spend looking at your resume? Well, typically it's not as long as you think. Most of the time, the very first go around when employers are looking at a resume, they're only going to spend 15 seconds deciding whether or not they want to consider you or give you a longer look. So you need to make sure your resume is set up in such a way that you're going to make an impression in those first 15 seconds. So when it comes to a resume, there is a right and a wrong way to make a resume, to present a resume, but it doesn't have to be a mystery. You can know what's the right way to do it. So we're going to talk about some of those tips. The first tip is don't use a template, like ever. And the reason for that is because one, most of the time nowadays when you're applying for a job, you're applying for it online. And when you apply for a job online, most companies use what they call applicant tracking softwares. And so this is a software that reads the resumes for them and essentially grades them on the information included. And so those individuals who quote unquote get a higher grade on their resume, they're more likely to have their resume reviewed by the hiring individual. But if you upload a template, the applicant tracking softwares can't read those documents. So therefore, it just reads as a blank sheet of paper. And so automatically you're going to be out of the running for the job. So always create a resume from scratch in a Microsoft Word document or some type of other Word document. One of the other big reasons not to use a template is that they're very hard to personalize. With templates, you're sort of nailed into the way they have things set up and the type of information that they think you should include on a resume, but often that stuff is not needed or not necessary. So when it comes to creating your resume from scratch, keep it original. Include sections that you think are pertinent for you for the job that you are applying for and that are going to highlight your skills and your experience. One thing I tell people is if you really don't know where to start in terms of formatting your own resume, feel free to look up examples online or even look up examples of templates online, and you can sort of copy their formatting, but do it yourself in a blank Word document rather than using the actual template itself. So on your resume, you obviously want to make sure you're communicating the right stuff. Some things are more important on a resume than others. Obviously the major, the education that you have is one of the most important things. Because if you're applying to be a doctor or a nurse, but you have a degree in English, well, they're probably not going to think you have the experience needed to, administer meds or IVs or to perform any type of medical procedures. So your major and your education is one of the top things that they look at. But oftentimes employers want to know, like, have you held a leadership position? Were you involved in extracurricular activities? GPA can be looked at, but only if it's a 3.0 or above. But some of the less important stuff on a resume, again, depending on what type of field you're going into, is the actual school you attended. Or can you speak another language? It doesn't mean that those aren't important, but there's other things that an employer is going to look at first within those 15 seconds. And then once they've narrowed down their applicant pool, then they're going to go back and look at those other quote unquote lesser important aspects of your resume. So when designing your own resume, use customized headings. And these are going to be different for each person because you're going to tailor it again to the job you're applying for and then your own personal education, your experience, and your skills. But here are just some examples of what you can include on there. Obviously, include your personal information, your contact information. How can they get in touch with you? Include your education, your skills. And when we talk about skills here, we're talking about those technical skills. So knowing how to use a special piece of machinery or equipment, or a specific computer software program, something like that, rather than transferable skills such as that you're a people person or you're detail oriented or you're good with conflict resolution. Those types of skills should be incorporated into your experience section. So when it comes to your experience, you might just have one overarching experience section, or again, based on your personal situation, you might break that down into multiple categories, such as campus involvement, or internships, practicums, clinicals, leadership activities, volunteer work, actual work experience that you've had, memberships, and the list can go on. So again, without using a template, when you're creating your resume on your own, you can tailor all this information to what you want your resume to reflect and what you think is going to be most important to the person that you are sending your resume into. So when it comes to your contact information, the biggest takeaway here is make sure you're using professional contact information. So obviously on your resume, you want to include your name, your address, your telephone number, how they can contact you. But when it comes to your email address, make sure you're using a professional email address, but also make sure that it's one that's going to be easily recognizable. If it's just a sort of a random series of letters and numbers, the employer is going to have a hard time knowing that that particular email address matches with you. So what I encourage students to always do is create a free email account that's using your name. That way the employer easily and quickly knows that, hey, this is how I can contact this person. So in your education section, there are some information that you can include, and some people are going to have detailed information sections, and some people are just going to have more basic ones. So obviously include your institution's name. What school did you attend? Include the location. Where was it located at? The city and the state. What degree and major did you earn? Um, if you haven't already graduated, what is your anticipated graduation date? And when it comes to your GPA, only include it is if it's a 3.0 or higher. If it's anything less than that, just leave it off. And chances are they're probably not even going to ask you about it later during an interview. But one thing I want to point out about education is if you are graduating or about to graduate or have recently graduated from college, we always encourage you to not include your high school information on your resume. Because obviously, if you have a college degree or you're working toward a college degree, then you have received a high school diploma. So it's not needed to include on a professional resume. And plus, you want to save that space on your resume for more applicable information. So here are some examples of the ways you can format an education section. And again, you'll see that top one is just more basic, and then that's perfectly fine. But they just included the university name, the location, their major, their graduation date, and their GPA. And then they decided to list that they were a member of the Student Nurse Association. But you'll see in this second example that it's a little bit more detailed, and the way they formatted the information is a little bit more detailed. So in their detail, they include courses that they, attended and they completed while they were in school that might be applicable to the job that they are completing. They included that they were on the dean's list, but then they also included the clinicals that they completed while they were in school. And so again, you can format this section however you want or need it to based on what's going to be included in the rest of your resume. So what I would say, for example, for the second education example on the screen, is if you're going to be talking in a little bit more detail about those clinical experiences, and that's going to be the bulk sort of your resume, maybe you don't want to list them here in your education section because you want to save that room to talk about them in more detail further down on your resume. So your experience section, this is really what your resume is all about. This is the bulk of it because it's in this section of your resume that you're going to be able to prove to an employer that you have the skills and the knowledge and the ability to do the job that you're applying for. So within this section, you want to make sure you're including the skills that you have, again, technical skills, as well as those transferable skills, those interpersonal skills. What accomplishments have you had? What were the results that you achieved through your work? And then what was the value that you have added into the previous places that you have worked at? So experience, again, is the number one thing employers are looking at on a resume. 95% of employers want to hire people who have previous work experience. And 65% of that 95 are looking for relevant work experience. And nearly 60% of that relevant work experience students attained through an internship or a co-op or a clinical or a practicum while they were students. And with certain degrees and certain majors, these things are built in to your degree program, but for others, they're not, and maybe you'll have to go out and find one. Or maybe you get a part-time job. Our office can also help you find internships or co-ops if needed. But you really want to make sure you're building and gaining this experience while you're in college so that when you graduate, you can have a large experience section already listed on your resume. So when it comes to writing the experience section, there's a couple of things we encourage you to do before you actually sit down and start writing it all up. And that's to brainstorm. So make a list of experience and activities and memberships that you held while you were in college. So what jobs have you had, whether they were paid jobs or not, and what did you accomplish? Did you volunteer anywhere? And if so, what did you do? Are you involved in any organizations or clubs or groups on campus? And if so, did you hold any particular role in that group, or did you assist with any of their events? Think through your education and your training. Did you complete a class project that allowed you to gain applicable experience? Make sure to sort of think through all those things, come up with a list, and then sit down and try to write your bullet points in your experience section. So when it comes to a skills section on your resume, what I want to point out is, again, this section should be focused on technical skills rather than those transferable interpersonal skills. So here are some examples. You want to include your certifications as well, but be very technical about software and equipment and programs that you've learned to use. Again, this is not the place where you include things such as conflict resolution or a team player. You can include those type of skills. You can work those into your experience section as you're writing your bullet points. So a skills section should really be focused on your relevant qualifications or your relevant technical skills that are going to qualify you for the job you're applying for. So when it comes to your resume, your words matter. You want to make sure you're using language that's going to be recognizable to those who are looking at your resume. So you can see in these two examples, again, somewhat different examples of how they chose to format it, but they used language and wording that is commonplace in the medical field. One thing I do want to point out about the format is you'll see in the top example, they completed 3 different internships, but essentially did the same, responsibilities and duties and work at each 3 internship. So rather than copying and pasting and listing those bullet points 3 different times on their resume, they just listed all of their clinical experience together and then just summarized it all at one time. Whereas in the second example, they have multiple different jobs where they did different things, and so they listed them separately. So when it comes to your experience section, you always want to present your information in bullet format rather than paragraph. And the reason we say to use bullet points rather than paragraphs is, again, it's easier and quicker for a potential employer to look at it and review it. Again, they're only going to spend 15 seconds that initial time they're looking at it, so you want to make it easy for them to read. So when it comes to writing your bullet points and formatting them, we encourage you to use what's called the ACE method. And so this is just essentially a formula as to how to write a bullet point and what to include. But the ACE method is made up of 3 parts: the action, the challenge, and the end results. So the action part is you discussing how you addressed a challenge, a concern, a task, or responsibility. So essentially, what did you have to do? The challenge is to identify it, to explain it. What was the problem and why did you have to overcome it? And then the end result is where you showcase and you highlight, these were the results of the work you completed. This is how what you did benefited and added value to the company. So when you're writing your bullet points, you want to be detailed as possible. You want to be able to not just state that you've done something, but you want to be able to prove it. You want to back it up with examples. And so here's a perfect example right here where it says provided excellent customer service. That's a very common bullet point that you'll see on a resume, but that doesn't provide a whole lot of detail. So look at the following examples that are a little bit more specific. They say explain procedures to 40 plus patients daily and answered questions to educate. They prioritize examinations with interdepartmental collaboration to optimize patient experience. So that all goes to show that they have customer service skills and that they were able to work with their clientele that came in. They were able to work with other departments, but it provides more detail and is more informative to a potential employer than just stating you have good customer service skills. Another example is monitored patients. But again, this doesn't really explain what you did or how you did it. So some better examples would be to use something that says recorded temperature and blood pressure, inserted catheters, and hooked up IVs on a 45-bed unit. As often as you can, include numbers, and you can quantify the work that you did. Always try to include those numbers. The second example is charted interactions using DocuNote software. Again, that shows that they are familiar with a specific type of software potentially used by a future employer. So those show you how you can take something as simple as monitored patients, and you can provide more detail and more explanation so it really stands out to the person looking at your resume. And then the final example is worked in obstetrics unit. So again, that's sort of vague. You don't really know what you did within that unit. So always think about what actually did you do and provide examples. So they monitored vital signs for expectant mothers and babies. They provided self-care information around postpartum recovery. And then they developed infant care handout following American Pediatric Association guidelines. Those provide the employer with way more information on what you have done, how you have added value to a previous employer, and what are some of the accomplishments you have achieved. So your biggest tool when writing your resume is to use the job description. And so this is why when you're applying for a job, you're really going to have to edit and tailor each resume for the specific job you're applying for. But what I encourage everyone to do is print out a copy of the job description. And before you sit down and write your resume, before you sit down to update your resume, go through that job description and highlight what you think are important phrases or important keywords, and make sure you incorporate those into your resume. Because again, you know, those keywords, those key phrases, if your resume is being reviewed by an applicant tracking software, those are the things it's going to use to quote unquote grade your resume to give you a higher grade. So as much as you can match your resume to the job description and use the same language and the wording that they use, the more it's going to stand out to a potential employer. So here are just some overall examples of how you can format your resume. And the truth is, there's no one right or wrong way necessarily to the format of a resume. You can format it, again, however it meets your needs, however it, showcases your experience in the best way, and however it is going to appeal to a potential employer. So you can have as much information on there as you think you need in each individual section. Some people are going to have longer education sections, whereas other people are going to have longer, potentially, activities or involvement sections. So again, tailor it to what meets your needs and what's best going to help you stand out amongst the other applicants. So let's recap just a little bit about resumes and go over some quick tips. So make sure to start your bullet points with action verbs. This really catches people's attention when they're going through and reading it, and it shows that you accomplished something, that you were working towards something. Avoid using complete sentences or paragraphs. Again, you don't need to do this when you're using bullet points, and avoid using the word I in your resume. Again, I've mentioned this several times, but use those bullet points. It's going to be easier for an employer to review your resume to see the relevant information, but also using bullet points can save you space and room on your resume so you can actually get more information to fit on your resume. Provide specific details. Don't be general and vague. Give examples, give descriptions. Really sell yourself and explain the work that you did in full detail. Quantify information. Use numbers whenever possible, because those are sort of going to pop out at an employer. And then focus on your accomplishments rather than your task. So rather than just stating, again, you monitored patients. Well, what did you accomplish? Well, you monitored 45 patients and you maintained their vital signs. So focus on your accomplishments rather than simply the tasks that you performed. And then when it comes to the order in which you include your bullet points, try to list the most impressive or the most important bullet points first. Again, as an employer is quickly glancing over and reviewing your resume for the first time, they're really probably going to be focusing on the top bullet points in each section. So put all of the most important information first. So once you have your resume all ready to go, you also generally have to submit a cover letter or a letter of intent to an employer as well. So for a cover letter or for statements of intent, these again typically accompany your resume, and they sort of go above and beyond. They're an extra step in addition to your resume that demonstrate that your qualifications are a good fit for the job. Essentially, it's an extra way that you can prove to an employer that you're a good fit, and that you can accomplish the job that you're applying for. So you need to understand the target. What are you trying to achieve with a cover letter? So you want to obviously demonstrate a sense of professionalism. A lot of times employers use cover letters to get a glimpse of your communication skills. Again, verbal and written communication skills are one of the top skills employers are often looking for. And so your resume and your cover letter are a great way that you can signify your communication skills, rather than just stating somewhere in there, you're a good communicator or you're well written. Your cover letter can actually prove that. You can elaborate on information in a resume. A lot of times in a resume, maybe you are more limited and you can't go into full detail on, a task that you accomplished, or a project that you started. But in your cover letter, you can explain those in a little bit more detail. You can communicate your value in a brief and understandable manner. You can let them know how you're going to be an asset to their company. And then again, just like your resume is your personal marketing brochure, your cover letter just further builds that interest in you as a candidate. So here's what to include in a cover letter. So think of it as a professional letter. And so with that professional letter, you want to format it so it's got your contact information listed at the top. Then you want to follow that with the contact information of the individual who is going to be reviewing your resume, as well as the company. And you want to make sure you are addressing it to the correct individual. You want to format it like a professional letter. And then in terms of the body of the cover letter, think of it as an essay style format. So you're going to have an introduction paragraph. You're going to have the body of the essay, and then you're going to have a concluding paragraph at the end. So in the introduction, you want to tailor your cover letter to each position that you apply for. And one of the ways you're going to do this is in that very first introduction paragraph. You want to make sure you're referencing the specific job, whether it be by title or by job number that you're applying for. You might also even want to include where you saw that job listed at. Also, that opening paragraph, the introduction paragraph, is a great place for you to express why are you interested in this job? Why are you taking the time to apply for it? And then when it comes to the body part of your cover letter, you're going to want to use the job description as a guide. Again, go back and look at what you've highlighted as the key words and the key phrases, because that's going to let you know what's important to the potential employer. And so if they list specific skills that they're looking for, or specific experience, or maybe it's the ability to use a certain type of equipment, you want to make sure you're talking about those things in your cover letter and what your personal experience with those things are. You want to make sure your cover letter is employer focused. And so what we mean by that is, rather than just talking about why you want the job, why you think this would be beneficial for you, you really want to show the employer how you can add value to them and how you can benefit their organization. And you want to make sure that within your cover letter, you're proving your skills and you're providing details. So whereas in a resume, you might not have enough room to provide, what we would quote unquote call a story. But a lot of times your bullet points, maybe it's something that you accomplished or a task that you were assigned to that you really excelled at, or an experience that you had that helped you really gain a skill. You can't really go into a lot of detail about those in your resume, but you can do that here in your cover letter. Also, again, make sure you're including any relevant accomplishments you have. So think of your cover letter as a way to expound upon the information that's included in your resume, where you can go into a little bit more detail. You can provide a little bit more proof as to how you do match the qualifications and match the description listed in the job description. So think of this as just an extra way to sell yourself to the employer. So stand out from the crowd when it comes to your resume, and there's a few things that you can do to ensure that this happens. Is one, make sure you're using proper formatting and correct grammar. Always strive to address it to a specific individual rather than just addressing it to whom it may concern or a hiring manager. Try to figure out the name of the person who's going to be looking at it. And what I tell people is it's perfectly okay to call up the company or the organization and just say, hey, I'm applying for this particular job. I'm working on putting all of my job application materials together. Who should I address it to? And to me, what that would say to a potential employer is that you're going above and beyond, and that you're truly invested and you're taking the time to do it right. Use your cover letter to indicate that you have knowledge of that particular company and that particular position. So again, you're wanting to make it employer focused, letting them know that you understand them and what they're looking for and what they need. As much as possible, keep it to just one page. Again, and potential employers are going to be overwhelmed with the number of resumes and cover letters that they are reading. So try to be respectful of their time and try to keep it to just a page. Always show appreciation at the end of the cover letter. Always thank them for their time, for their consideration. But then also you're welcome to say, I look forward to hearing from you in the future, or I would love the opportunity to meet with you and discuss my qualifications in further detail. It's perfectly okay to include that at the end of your cover letter in that concluding paragraph, but make sure in that concluding paragraph you're thanking them. And then, of course, before you submit it, before you turn it in, have somebody proof it for you. Have them look over it, read over it, make sure that it reads smoothly, that the grammar is correct, that there's no typos. Just have somebody proofread it for you. So once you've done those things, once you've gotten your resume taken care of and you've gotten your cover letter written, that's awesome. That's great. And now it's time to succeed. And so that's honestly what our office is here for you. We want to help you succeed. We want to help you to explore, to connect, to experience, and then to achieve your goals. So our office can help you when it comes to writing a cover letter, whether it's you don't know how to start because you've always used a template, or maybe you have a resume, but you want us to proofread it for you, or maybe you've never written a cover letter and so you're not sure if you formatted it correctly or you've included the correct information in the cover letter. Our office is here for you for those things. We also have a lot of other services that we can offer that can help you when you begin the job search process. And these are available to you whether you're a student or an alumni. But we can help you, explore careers and career options and what you can do with your major. We can, do mock interviews for you. If you're nervous about an upcoming interview, do a practice one with us. If you decide to pursue further education, we can help with graduate school applications. We have a lot of online tools and resources that are available to students that can be beneficial in their job search process. Every semester, we offer job fairs and networking events, as well as other additional events that can help you, find or excel at an internship or a clinical, that can help you build a good resume, that can help you sort of know how to present yourself in a job interview or in a career fair. We can help you with general job or internship search. But then we also offer Eagle CareerNet that helps you look for jobs, whether it be full-time jobs, internships, work studies. You can find all of those and more on Eagle CareerNet as well. So there are 3 of us who make up our career services teams. We have Megan Moon, our director, Jacob Murphy, our career development advisor, and then of course myself, the career coach, Katie Maddox. If you ever do want to meet with us, Right now we are encouraging virtual appointments. So feel free to give us a call at 606-783-2233, and we can schedule a time to meet with you one-on-one to assist you in creating a great resume and a great cover letter. You're also welcome to email those documents to us at careerservices@moorheadstate.edu, and we're happy to provide feedback to you on there as well. But if you do need to stop by in person, our office is located on the ground floor of the library. If you're standing facing the library, you'll just follow the path around to the left and you will come straight to our office. But please know we're here to help you, we're here to serve you, and if you need anything, please reach out to us. Best of luck.